So Obama makes comments about defund the police. Now, there were a lot of people pushing under the defund the police slogan for Black Lives Matter and so forth, and that gained a huge amount of notoriety as one of the main complaints, statements, demands that was a part of that particular movement. Now, people like me, or let's just say I had an issue with the slogan because I thought that it was problematic in it of itself in regards to the way the American public look at police. Just more so as the majority, per se, of the public. And when you look at the phrasing of it, I was kind of right. I mean, people were against defunding the police. What they were for is taking money and moving it over into social programs as opposed to the police. Meaning, the entire point of the defund the police slogan was to get across this notion that the police needs to be defunded and the emphasis needs to be put on other aspects of social policy that would lessen the need for the police in the first place. My issue was the slogan, the phrasing of it. I thought that they could have gotten more bang for the buck with something else. But by the same token, the whole point of the phrasing was to get a conversation going. And whether you agree with it or not, the provocative nature of it gained eyes and it gained attention. Hope and change gained eyes and gained attention. Obama was okay with that slogan and that phrase. I think the difference between the two is that hope and change doesn't mean anything. That it gets into people this notion of these expansive ideas, these expansive topics. And those people may feel a particular way when they hear the words hope and change. It sits a particular way, but it doesn't mean anything. The entire point of it is that emotional symbolism that he's trying to hit. He's okay with that phrasing because that phrasing hits at something deep and it hits at something pure and hopeful within individuals. But it hits at those things without having any capacity to deliver. But by the time the capacity to deliver is up, you may forget about those things that you hoped for in the first place. It's a con artist, basically. It's a bullshit artist. I'm going to give you something that doesn't really mean anything. And by the time I get far enough away, you'll realize it doesn't mean anything, but you would have no capacity to do anything about it because you've already given me your vote and your support. And I thank you for that. I'm making the point that it seems that his criticism is more so based on the optics of it all. My hope and change was able to deliver votes, even if it wasn't delivered on the notion of hope and change. Your defund the police. Yes, you want to be legitimate. Yes, it's real. Yes, you're talking about something substantial in regards to a specific policy of moving funds from one aspect of focus to another. But the difference here is the public isn't on board for it. Like, it's the optics for Obama. Obama's issue with the term is the optics of defund the police, not with the inherent thing that it's trying to accomplish, which in some odd way makes the criticism, even though I think it on some level is right, in an odd way makes it kind of worse, considering that Obama was the guy who's pushing for hope and change, almost as a con in his election to get votes. That's sad in a way, which makes me, squeamish that I even have to say that I, to some degree, in part anyway, agree with the criticism that defund the police could have gotten what it wanted more, potentially, without the phrasing. But I could be wrong on that. I mean, somebody could make the argument that the very fact that you're talking about it in and of itself gets the bang for the buck that it was trying to get. And that if you didn't phrase it in a provocative way, if you didn't make it as an in-your-face thing, that the media, that people wouldn't have talked about it at all. That's also potentially true. I think I float and vacillate on that one, on which one is more true. During the Black Lives Matter movement, I think I erred towards the side that it was less true. Because I thought in that moment, the thing that you push for in that moment is issues of poverty. That if you really want to get to this notion of defunding the police and everything else, what you're trying to get at is poverty. You want to basically defund the police by eliminating the need for the police. And you eliminate the need for the police by basically putting more resources into those communities, getting those communities to the point where those communities are up to an economic level that diminishes the need for the cops in the first place. I mean, if you're looking at the various communities that are, let's say, ensconced in poverty, well, those are often where the police are, because crime becomes somewhat of a logical thing in those areas. You have, these fines, you have all of this stuff, these that they hit these communities with, where they're able to suck resources out of the communities. But in very basic terms, crime often is in areas with poverty. And the issue here seems to be the poverty. That seems to be the thing that's primary. Get rid of it, and you can eliminate some of the need for the cops. And more importantly, many of the cops' functions, most of their functions, does not require them running around with guns. Meaning, reorganize, change how you do, or how communities go about policing itself. That's what I think the basic point is. You don't necessarily need a man running with a gun, ready to put a bullet in somebody at the shortest whim. How they're trained and all of this other stuff. Personally, I don't think you can give cops kittens and make them better people in regards to the way they go about their task. And there's something to be said that it's potentially the type of individual that would even gravitate to that job is probably the wrong person for that job. So it may be somewhat of a quagmire in regards to how to fix something like that. But Jamal Bowman, who was on CNN the first time around, going in on Rahm Emanuel, and while he was going in on Rahm Emanuel, his feet was cut, like bloop, just off. Bowman is back on CNN. Now, whether or not CNN cut him off intentionally because Rahm Emanuel didn't float on those shows, in those circles, who knows? They would never admit to that. You could never prove it. But he was going in on Rahm Emanuel. He didn't even get to the point of lead in the water. I think he was at the point where he hid the fact that the police executed a man in Chicago. Bowman is back. And this time, he's going after Obama on the defund the police. And I like Bowman. Clearly, I like Bowman. That's why I cover his content. But he misses the point. And I think a lot of people miss the point on the criticism on this. It's not the substance. It's the optics that Obama is criticizing. Now, you can take issue with Obama, but what you're explaining is substance. He doesn't disagree with you on substance. He's disagreed with you on optics. He's talking about the shallow aspect of this and saying that you could have gotten more bang for your buck with something else that didn't hit on this very specific point that the American public is not entirely going to agree with you on. Let's hear his pushing back on Obama.
Mr. Bowman, I want to ask you about something that President Obama said this week. He made some news when he warned activists not to use what he calls snappy slogans like defund the police. You tweeted the following in response. You tweeted, "Damn, Mr. President, didn't you say Trayvon could have been my son in 2014? Black Lives Matter was too much. In 2016, Kaepernick was too much. Today, discussing police budgets is too much. The problem is America's comfort with Black death, not discomfort with slogans."
I love that criticism. God, that's an awesome criticism. Now, Obama, who, right here, didn't you say Trayvon could have been my son in 2014? Black Lives Matter was too much. If you remember, Black Lives Matter, even though it gained popularity this time around, it started under Obama because black people were still being murdered under Obama. Cops have killed, over 1,000 people a year. And over 99% of those walk without charges. In fact, they aren't charged at all. So making this point of saying Black Lives Matter, the point of it, and honestly, if you really look at the terminology and the phrasing and what is being said, it's insecurity. Like, think about it for the moment. If you were entirely secure that Black Lives Matter and that everybody around in the room understood that they mattered, why would you have to say it? You wouldn't. You have to say it because you believe that other people don't get it, that the way society is functioning doesn't seem to prioritize this particular life and these particular lives with any particular real legitimate value. And I'm not saying just the words, I'm saying codified it into law in the way that people behave, especially cops. So yeah, Kaepernick, same thing. People were saying it was too much. But people weren't up to those items now. Back then, people weren't there. Neither was Obama for that point. I guess I'm making the point that he's right with his criticism here. Let's let him keep going because I want him to make his point. Because I've been one of those people who said the phrasing of it is problematic, and that, whereas hitting something on poverty hits at the root, I would argue, whereas defund the police hits at a result of the poverty. That's all. That's where I come from, the set. I don't know if Obama gets there. I don't even know where Obama is on this, if I'm being bluntly honest. But on this very specific point, Obama is talking specifically about the optics. He's talking about the way the public regards it. That's the way I view this. This wasn't an argument about substance. That's why I kind of went into that part in the opening. Obama's thing is how it looks, not the substance. And whatever you want to think of Obama because of that, fair enough. But that's what I think this is about.
And quickly, I want to play for you something else that President Obama said in a different interview this week when asked specifically about defunding the police.
No, because I think the phrase implies that somehow we could do without the police, or that the police are the only source of our problem. But what I would do is rethink how we do policing in a lot of communities.
So right there, the phrase implies that we can, etc. And if you think about it, when Republicans hit that, or corporate Democrats hit that, what do they hit at? Oh, you're trying to abolish the police. They're trying to abolish the police. The phrase itself gets mangled in the politics in regards to the way people talk about it. Now, the public was able to understand the difference. When you ask them, they would say, no, we don't want to abolish the police. We're not for that. Which means that the phrase itself is being hit by the public itself with the disagreement. By the same token, the public will say, yes, we do believe that police have gotten too violent. Meaning, A, Black Lives Matters, their point was getting across. And they would say, yes, we are on board for moving policy or emphasis in the way that we do our policing into something else that doesn't involve people getting shot and murdered and killed. He's talking about optics. And I don't think he's wrong on that. I think the optics of it are problematic. I think the optics of it, I don't think he's wrong on that. I guess I'm making the very basic point that if you're going to hit him on this, you can't hit him that he's against what you're talking about in spirit, because he hasn't come out against it. What he's coming about is basically the way this is being used from a language standpoint implies something. And the implication of it is not going to be something that the public is going to be on board for. Even when the literal phrasing of it is defund, talking about pulling money out, not necessarily get rid of, doesn't matter. It gets cast as something else. When, from the standpoint of the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that was taking place after George Floyd, the emphasis, I honestly believe, should have been on poverty. Yes, defund the police. But if you're making the argument about poverty and you're hitting it over and over again, that many of the communities and many of these interactions are coming from that position or that situation, then I think you would have been able to get far more. I don't know. I think the public would have been far more on board for understanding and grasping that at that particular moment. Something that oftentimes the public skips over and doesn't entirely pay attention to. The news media tries to avoid it and ignore it and talk to a very specific section of the public that can afford and that can do things and have financial means. I'm making the point that that was the moment for that to be put on the agenda. And I think when the public's attention was there, that was the time. I think defund the police is a subset of that. Meaning, the moment that you deal with the poverty stuff, the defund the police almost springs immediately out of it. You can pull back on that. Yes, there's always going to be a fight. But on this one, I don't think Obama's entirely and completely wrong. I think if Obama talks more in this interview, I'm probably going to disagree with him. But on the very specific point of optics, I can't say he's wrong. Let's hear more.
So what he and others are saying is it's the branding, defund the police. It's bad messaging because it turns people off to the real reforms that you are trying to put forward. What is your response and your take on that? Do you think there's something to that?
Defund the police does not mean abolish the police. It means a dramatic reduction in the number of police in our poor communities, and particularly our poor Black and brown communities. Historically, when our communities have needed jobs, they didn't.
Just to point out, again, he skips over the point. He keeps skipping over the point. People always skip over the point. The point is not the actual meaning of defund the police. Like, you could have a book about what defund the police means. It doesn't matter. What matters is what the branding, and that's her point. That's Obama's point. That's even to some degree, I guess, my point. The branding. Is the branding to the betterment or to the detriment? Now, I've made an argument on the show for both. Just now, I made an argument for both, saying maybe you need the provocative part, but maybe the provocative part gets you less bang for your buck. Bowman, as much as I like the guy, entirely ignores that point and goes into an explanation of what defund the police means. Something that I already agree with him on, and that is not necessarily up for what we're talking about. I'm just saying he's talking about something different. One is branding. The other one is the actuality of it. The actuality matters, yes, but so does the branding. That's what she's asking you about.
Bring us jobs. They brought us police, and they created a system of mass incarceration. And we live in a country where if you're Black or brown, you're more likely to be killed by police and more likely to be incarcerated and more likely to not afford bail. So we're focusing on this slogan, defund the police, but where are the resources to bring jobs into our communities? Where are the resources to fully fund our public schools? Where are the resources to deal with the issue of housing and food insecurity? We're not talking.
So you're talking about poverty. Poverty. You mean poverty. You mean poverty. Ding, ding. Poverty. Resources to put into our schools, resources to put into our houses, resources to put into our communities. This is kind of my point. The issue is poverty. I get that the defund the police thing is, rising up because of the George Floyd murders and all of the Jacob Blake murders and all of these people being shot all over the course of a year. 1,000 people, over 1,000 people a year. Get it. Yes. Agreed. But what you're talking about here is literally poverty. Meaning the root of what you're trying to get at is poverty. And I'm just kind of making the point that that is the thing that you hit at. That is the thing that I think could have gotten a lot of bang for its buck. But what you're using as this kind of, I guess, way into that argument about poverty is defund the police. The point I'm making here is the branding. The point Obama making here is the branding. And you're arguing the substance. We know what it means. We're bright enough to know what it means. The question is whether or not the branding of it was successful. Did it get you the bang for your buck? Now, let's be very clear. This is being brought up in context of the races in the House of Representatives and the poor result that the Democrats got. That has nothing to do with the defund the police nonsense. That's Democrats basically using and looking for some excuse to explain their own failures once again. Beforehand, it was the Russians. Now, this election was apparently perfect. Nothing wrong with this election because Joe Biden won. And so they can't use the Russians. So what do they use? Oh, progressives. You wanted to defund the police. And you pushing for the defund the police thing hurt us. Nonsense. The people who were pushing for Medicare for all won. All of them. The people who were pushing for Green New Deal, all of them but one won their seats. This wasn't this election where people were looking for the right-wing stuff. I mean, if you're looking for the drug policies, across the United States, one state after the next, Oregon went as far as to decriminalize pretty much all drugs. So it's nonsense about this defund the police stuff. That's a perspective that they're pushing because they don't necessarily want to deal with the fact that they failed miserably. Hey, if you don't offer anything to the public, you would fail, especially when the social safety net is being found wanting. Donald Trump was able to do as well as Donald Trump was able to do because at the end of the day, the public is so used to not getting anything that the paltry 1,200 and the PPP, even though it went to big business, was something that the public acknowledges, okay, the president did something. I think that's where the overperformance came in. from the standpoint of Democrats, Joe Biden ran a race where he basically offered nothing other than I'm Joe Biden. And you expected to get seats off of that. Why? Why? Why do you expect to win when you don't offer anything? Represent your interests, people's interests. You get their votes. That is that straightforward. Bowman is the epitome of that, representing their interests, getting their votes. And by the way, Black Lives Matter, that upswing of support basically lifted him into that office to some degree. Yes, he did well, but he was able to get in off of the protests and so forth. You have a new member of the squad, and that new member of the squad is unapologetic, and I love it. The fact that he's defending the defund the police call, because I don't think you should run away from this stuff. And whether you noticed or not, in Political Misfits, I even agreed, yeah, you shouldn't run away from it. At this point, you're stuck with the phrasing of it. It's the fastest thing moving. You back it. And Obama is, maybe he's picking at the claim per se, but, you know, oftentimes you can bring people to a particular position, and sometimes it does say something provocative for them to even hear it, just so you can talk about it to explain it. So, you know, like I said, I've vacillated on this. I don't necessarily know what's entirely right or wrong in regards to the more bang for your buck, using it or without it. I do know Democrats are just using this as an excuse for why they failed miserably, and progressives in no way should try to give any quarter to this being one of the reasons why they fail. They fail because they don't represent anything. Period. Like, share, and subscribe. Bowman was able to get his entire time this time around. So, shout out to Bowman. Andrea Rosario Glore. JB cropped CNN. Oh, Jamal Bowman cropped CNN in the nose the other day on Rahm. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Because, you know, see, Rahm Emanuel is a swamp creature, right? I mean, the epitome of swamp creature. And so the notion that Joe Biden is considering him in administration gets across how little he thinks of blacks and how little he thinks of progressives. I don't think he cares. And honestly, at the point where you give him that much support and give him all of your votes like that, and you ask him for nothing in return, why are you shocked? Yeah, he could put Rahm Emanuel in administration. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. You've already given him the authority to do this stuff. And I don't know what power you have at your disposal to stop him or to rap him on the knuckles for doing so. Jamal Bowman got on there, and yeah, he laid into him. He, murder, hiding the murder, the lead in the water. He didn't even get to the lead in the water. But Rahm Emanuel is a swamp creature. The attack on education that took place in Chicago, yeah, lefties should have qualms with this. And yeah, Jamal Bowman was not afraid to get his qualms across. So definitely, I'm going to leave it here. Look, I know this one was more nuanced in regards to my perspective, and it is. I see the value in defund the police, but I also see the problems with it from a phrasing standpoint. I vacillate on both. I don't have a strong opinion on whether it's yes, stand by it, or yes, drop it. Ultimately, yeah, I vacillate on it. That's the only honest opinion I can give. But Obama is full of shit. First, know that much. And the statement of hope and change is a snappy slogan. But again, that slogan doesn't mean anything. That slogan makes people feel good, even though there's nothing behind that slogan to actually deliver on that feeling. It's a con artist. It's buying a lemon, basically, voting for this guy, and then you realize that vote was a pipe dream. The hope that was in you vanishes after a few years. Like, share, subscribe.